So we'll be working our way through the June 2017 AQA English Language Paper 1. And this is from a short story. So if you have a look at the insert, I'm going to be reading that through. So this extract is from the beginning of a short story by Catherine Mansfield. It is the early 1900s and Rosabelle, a lower class girl who works in a hat shop, is on her way home. At the corner of Oxford Circus, Rosabelle bought a bunch of violets, and that was practically the reason why she had so little tea, for a scone and a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa are not sufficient after a hard day's work in a hat shop. As she swung onto the step of the bus, grabbed her skirt with one hand and clung to the railing with the other, Rosabelle thought she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner, something hot and strong and filling. Rosabelle looked out of the windows. The street was blurred and misty, but light striking on the panes turned their dullness to opal and silver, and the jewellers' shops seen through this were fairy palaces. Her feet were horribly wet, and she knew the bottom of her skirt and petticoat would be coated with black, greasy mud. There was a sickening smell of warm humanity. It seemed to be oozing out of everybody in the bus, and everybody had the same expression, sitting so still, staring in front of them. Rosabelle stirred suddenly and unfastened the two top buttons of her coat. She almost felt stifled. Through her half-closed eyes, the whole row of people on the opposite seat seemed to resolve into one meaningless, staring face. She began to think of all that had happened during the day. Would she ever forget that awful woman in the grey mackintosh, or the girl who had tried on every hat in the shop and then said that she would call in tomorrow and decide definitely? Rosabelle could not help smiling. The excuse was worn so thin. But there had been one girl, a girl with beautiful red hair and a white skin and eyes the colour of that green ribbon, shot with gold they had got from Paris last week. Rosabelle had seen her carriage at the door. A man had come in with her, quite a young man and so well dressed. "What is it exactly that I want, Harry?" she had said, as Rosabelle took the pins out of her hat, untied her veil, and gave her a hand mirror. "You must have a black hat," he answered, "a black hat with a feather that goes right round it, and then round your neck and ties in a bow under your chin, and a decent-sized feather." The girl glanced at Rosabelle laughingly. "Have you any hats like that?" They had been very hard to please. Harry would demand the impossible, and Rosabelle was almost in despair. Then she remembered the big untouched box upstairs. "Oh, one moment, madam," she had said. "I think perhaps I can show you something that will please you better." She had run up breathlessly, cut the cords, scattered the tissue paper, and yes, there was the very hat. Rather large, soft, with a great curled feather, and a black velvet rose, nothing else. They had been charmed. The girl had put it on and then handed it to Rosabelle. "Now let me see how it looks on you," she said. Rosabelle turned to the mirror and placed it on her brown hair, then faced them. "Oh, Harry, isn't it adorable?" the girl cried. "I must have that." She smiled again at Rosabelle. "It suits you beautifully." A sudden ridiculous feeling of anger had seized Rosabelle. She longed to throw the lovely perishable thing in the girl's face and bent over the hat, flushing. "It's exquisitely finished off inside, madam," she said. The girl swept out to her carriage and left Harry to pay and bring the box with him. "I shall go straight home and put it on before I come out to lunch with you," Rosabelle heard her say. Okay, so then we're going to lead through the questions. So today I'm going to focus on question 1 and question 2. So question 1's easy. Read the first part of the source from lines 1 to 5. List 4 things about Rosabelle from this part of the source. Now, the only thing that makes this perhaps a little bit less simple is that a lot of people make very, very silly mistakes. So when it says list 4 things about Rosabelle from this part of the source, some people end up writing things like bought a bunch of violets. That's it. Which doesn't actually make any sense. So what we need that in is we need that in a full sentence. Okay, it doesn't have to be a quotation. You would just say she bought a bunch of violets. Okay, she had very little to eat. You could say that what lines am I looking at from lines 1 to 5? You could say that she hadn't had a good dinner. Yeah, so as long as you're saying things like she and answering in full sentences, then actually that's not too bad. We can deal with that. We can give you marks there. But it makes it very difficult for us to give you marks if you're not writing in full sentences. So it makes it a big issue for us. So, and the next thing that we need to look at then is question 2. Now, question 2 is a little bit more difficult. Question 2 is going to be written sort of in peel paragraphs this time. So we're going to make sure that we're writing in peel paragraphs. So question 2 says, look at lines 6 to 14 of the source. How does the writer use language here to describe Rosabel's bus journey home? Now, this is an 8-mark question. And what people have a tendency to do, which wastes a lot of time, is they have a tendency to try to write as many peel paragraphs as they can, because what they do is they put one quotation in per peel paragraph. And if you start doing that, then actually what you're going to realise is that you're running out of time, because you don't have time to keep setting up a peel paragraph, to keep writing a point. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to make actually your evidence, you want to have sort of a few pieces of evidence, make your analysis really long. So these will be very long peel paragraphs, but you might only have about 2 of them, okay? So what we would do is we would pick out anything that we know for definite is a technique, okay? Because this is looking at language, so we're going to look at language techniques. So Rosabel looked out of the windows, the street was blurred and misty. So you could pick out the adjectives blurred and misty. But light striking on the panes turned their dullness to opal and silver. So again, you've got the adjectives opal and silver. And the jeweller's shop seen through this were fairy palaces. Okay, so then we know that those 3 could be used in a peel paragraph together, couldn't they? Because, for example, the street was blurred and misty. You've got 2 sort of negative adjectives there. So it seems like her surroundings are quite negative. Her journey seems quite negative, quite sort of very, very unattractive. But, and then the light comes in and they become opal and silver. So we're talking about sort of precious materials here. And the jeweller's shop seen through this were fairy palaces. Again, a metaphor there. So we've got 4 lots of adjectives and a metaphor. Fairy palaces, that seems very positive and precious as well, just like opal and silver. So again, we're seeing here that Rosabel's journey starts negatively, but then she starts to see some positives in it. However, she sees positives outside her journey. These aren't inside, these aren't happening to her. You know, she's not in the jeweler shop. So actually, it seems very much like her entire journey is a bit of a struggle for her, but when she looks outside she can see that actually there's a lot more to offer in the world. So, you know, things that she'll never be able to afford, like she can't even afford a good dinner, let alone jewelry. So she'll never be able to go out into the jewelers, which makes it seem almost like this journey is taunting her. She's being teased. And then we could go into the next peel paragraph. So we've said that. In addition, her feet were horribly wet. She knew the bottom of her skirt and petticoat would be coated with black, greasy mud. So we've got the adverb horribly. We've got that sort of sensory imagery of her being like wet and her feeling sort of weighed down. And then we've got the idea of black, greasy mud. So again, we've got those negative adjectives, black and greasy. So it's very much a contrast between what Rosabel can see outside and how she feels on this journey. So what she sees when she's on her journey is very, very positive, but it just reminds her of how horrendous her own journey is. You know, I can look outside at these beautiful things, but I can't have them because I'm here in a black, greasy, gross skirt, and outside are all these beautiful things that I will never have. So that becomes two paragraphs, okay? So that becomes 2 peel paragraphs, 2 quite long peel paragraphs, where we've looked at actually quite a range of techniques. Now, then we could also go on to say there was a sickening smell of warm humanity. So again, more sensory imagery here, the idea of smell, and how it's sickening, how it's that again, these negative connotations coming through. And she felt stifled as well. So again, that sensory imagery, that idea of how she feels, how she perceives her journey. So her journey is very unpleasant. So we are looking at all the ways that her journey seems very unpleasant. And that becomes the basis of our question 2. So the main things that we don't want to start doing for question 2, the main things that we want to remember that we have to do, is we don't have time for loads and loads of separate peel paragraphs. We're only being given lines 6 to 14, which means we need to look at the entire thing and pack in as many quotations as we can. But the best thing is that most of these quotations will link together. So they're not going to all be proving different things. They're all going to be saying something about her journey, and they can all link together. We can link all the negative ones together and say these adjectives portray her journey negatively. And it makes it into one peel, rather than just setting up loads and loads of different peels and then running out of time, because it's only 8 marks. So we're not going to be spending more than 10 minutes on this. Okay, so that's question 1 and 2 for today, and then I'll do question 3.